Hello, Avatar fans, and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be episode 225 of our regular shows, and we are recording this on February 20th, 2021. This is going to be our review special for Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy, which came out earlier this week, and we also have some news to go over. This is the official podcast for the fan site, AvatarTheLastAirbenderOnline.com. I'm going to be your host, Morgan Airspeed Prime, and joining me on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
Excellent. So, we're going to jump straight into the news. We have quite a list of things to go through, but I don't think we'll be spending a ton of time on any of it in particular. There's just a lot of stuff. I think I said this in one of my videos towards the end of last year that lots of companies are going to get the Avatar license this year, and that's completely turning out to be true. So we'll start off with, I think, one of the things we sort of teased was potentially going to be news from the last podcast, which was, I think, Funko Fair was about to happen the day after or something like that. And Funko Fair came and went, and while there was an Avatar announcement, it wasn't the one anyone was really looking for. It's still kind of cool, but it's not exactly what people wanted. So instead of getting new Avatar Funko Pops, the rumored ones, we instead got Avatar Pop pins announced. So we have Appa, Sokka, Aang, Katara, and there's also a Chase kind of Spirit Aang, which is all kind of sparkly. And these seem cool enough. It doesn't seem like these are available in from as many places as the actual Funko Pops, and just the interest in them doesn't seem as high. The problem seems to just be that for most people, it's this is just the actual Funko Pop, transferred over into a pin form, except the Appa, which looks way too wide to try and get across the effect of the character. And just there was a lot of disappointment when this was the Avatar announcement, especially when you realize that one of these Funko Pop pins is a good deal more expensive than a normal Funko Pop. So I guess that means the quality is decent, but wasn't really the announcement people wanted. What are your thoughts on this as the Avatar Funko Fair announcement?
Yeah, no, I definitely can understand people's sort of disappointment. I think a lot of what we knew to be the rumors about it definitely spoke to there being actual pops or new ones, or ones that sort of increased their line in general. I don't think anyone particularly was waiting to see if they were coming out with pins. I'm not familiar with Funko Pop that much, so I didn't even know that they really did pins these type of way. I mean, they do look cool, but like you said, they are pretty much just a transplant of the actual, real Funko Pops, just sort of in, sort of 2D form here. So there's not much more to them, and them being a little bit more expensive, even if some places do have them a bit marked down, doesn't quite, garner the interest from them that sort of seem to be building up around them.
Yeah, the other thing is the bending effects for Aang and Katara. The color they've chosen is very weird. It's purple, basically, for both air and water. It kind of looks more like Unalaq's Dark Spirit Bending than anything else. So I don't know if that's just that the pictures are just of a mock-up and not the final thing, but it's kind of weird. But yeah, that's that. Also, on the Funko Pop side of things, we'll cover this now, there's been even more rumors about the actual second wave of Avatar Funko Pop. So in this case, the source is Pop Holmes, who's another, one of these people who on Instagram, stuff like that, who gets the rumors. There's a lot of Funko rumors around. Usually they actually come true, which is why we're talking about them here. They have a list that sort of combines the standard Pops and the exclusive Pops together. So they're saying that, again, this is the sort of unofficial list. He specifies nothing's official until announced, but this is what the rumors are saying. So Wave 2 of Avatar Funko Pops is going to be Admiral Zhao, Ozai, Suki, Ty Lee, Aang with all elements. There's going to be an Aang with all elements that's a special edition glow in the dark. There's going to be a Zhao with Fireball, that's a special edition glow in the dark. There's going to be a Mei with Knives, special edition, and a Blue Spirit Zuko special edition chase version. And then the one not mentioned here that has been rumored elsewhere is the sort of Spirit Aang, but that could end up being like the glow in the dark Aang with all elements. So this kind of combines everything together and seems kind of reasonable. I think the only thing that maybe seems a little odd here is that Zhao is going to be potentially getting an exclusive. And the main positive from this, I take, is definitely that it seems like Mei is going to be getting a pop. She seemed like one of the only main characters missing from this. But this seems great. I think we've already discussed the core of this list before. Very excited to see what they do with Suki, Ty Lee, everyone. The big Aang with all elements is going to be like a pop super, and I'm excited to see what that is. Mei getting a pop now is going to be cool. Blue Spirit seemingly getting confirmed. Again, what the Chase edition is versus the normal one, I guess that'll be an interesting distinction. But what are your thoughts on this new rumored list?
I mean, it definitely sounds just as cool as what we were sort of expecting before. It seems like a lot to me, especially with them having, various sort of variants and chase versions, and the larger size pops. So I don't know, it seems like a lot to come out at one potential time, although I do know in general Funko Pop does, not only just within Avatar, but just overall they have a lot that they push out for all of the sort of licenses that they have. So it's not uncommon for them to push out, a huge amount, but it does seem quite a lot for one franchise that I don't think we've quite seen that many at the same time. At least not for Avatar. So it'll be interesting to see what actually comes out of that. Hopefully it's true, especially for people who are looking at getting those. But I guess we'll just sort of have to wait like we were waiting before.
Yeah, all the rumors seem to point to basically the idea that the reason they didn't announce Wave 2 of the normal pops at Funko Fair is that the Funko Fair stuff was all like first half of the year announcements, so basically up to like June, and Avatar looks like it's probably going to be like a July-August release, so we'll probably still hear about them in the next kind of couple of weeks because they'll be some of the earliest second half of the year stuff. At least that's what the rumors are saying, at least. So again, the amount of people talking about the rumors, most of them linking up very well, it seems all but confirmed we're getting most of these figures, and it looks really good. So now we just need to see some pictures, and hopefully in the coming weeks we will see that. Next up, Dark Horse, some comic and book news. So the first one, probably the most notable one here, Avatar: The Last Airbender Smoke and Shadow Omnibus. Finally officially announced, and the cover went up straight away. There was no wait between the listing going up and the cover. We got the cover straight away. So the release date's going to be September 29th, 2021, and on the cover it's the typical new Gurihuru cover. Azula gets to be the focus character in the center, and then the characters surrounding her are Suki, Mei, Zuko, and Aang. So I think we all maybe thought might Mei get the spotlight, but they've gone for Azula here. My guess is purely because they sort of acknowledged that Azula is probably more of a popular character than Mei, but it does feel a bit weird because Azula doesn't come into the book until the end, and it's kind of a spoiler in a way that Azula's even in the series if you haven't read it yet, so that's maybe a little bit of an odd one, but I can see what they were going for here. I definitely like the cover. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I also really like the cover. I mean, yeah, it is true that she doesn't come in until much later on, but I think, like you said, in terms of popularity and, it wouldn't be hard to figure out, what's actually going to happen in this book, ahead of time, even if you don't already have it. So I don't know if that's as much of an issue, but I think I really like the design that they have for it.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing to say about this is obviously the release date is a little bit weird in that they've been very consistent with the omnibuses since they launched them with the promise of it's 4 months between each omnibus. But this one is a good bit afterwards. There's been obviously some sort of a delay here, or they're still doing things in threes, because the Rift omnibus is out in like a week or two, basically. So 4 months after that would be more like June, but this is actually coming out in September. So there's like a 3 month sort of extra break on top of this, which is kind of weird because it is just a reprint book. Like there's actually going to be that sort of a delay. And the same delay applies to the other thing we're talking about here, which is Legend of Korra, Art of the Animated Series, Book 2, Spirits, Hardcover, 2nd Edition, Deluxe Edition. Quite a title. Yeah, every time I talk about these in the videos, even the review I did on the Avatar one, I wish they'd come up with a clearer way to say this. But either way, the new edition of the Book 2 hardcover art book, obviously we're getting the standard edition and the deluxe edition, but I think the deluxe edition is the main thing to focus on. We don't have the cover yet, though Brian on Instagram posted up a piece of art that he's working on for a Dark Horse book, and it's Korra in an outfit she wears in book 2. It's not the complete piece of art, it seems like just the image of Korra, so I assume there's going to be some spirit stuff going on in that. So they're still using the placeholder old art book cover here for the image, but the main information here is that the new thing is going to be featuring creative commentary from DiMartino and Konietzko, and a brand new foreword by Korra voice actor PJ Byrne. So Janet Varney is going to be doing the foreword for the book 1 2nd edition art book. PJ Byrne's doing it for the book 2 one, and I'm guessing they'll get David Faustino and Seychelle Gabriel to do the book 3 and 4 one. So that's actually a kind of cool thing as the set gets more and more closer to completion. But beyond that, it doesn't look like there's going to be anything too much different or special going into this 3rd deluxe edition release. But what are your thoughts on what we know about this one so far?
Yeah, I mean, I like how they're doing the forward and, the little bits that we know of the new or potential new cover coming. Definitely seems pretty cool. So no, overall, I think it's interesting, just, the idea of them doing the 2nd edition and sort of updating it. I think, people who are getting it for the first time, and, since it is sort of having a little bit of a resurgence in popularity here, I guess it kind of makes sense to sort of push these out, and, anyone who's looking to get it now can get these versions over the original, ones that we've gotten from before.
Yeah, obviously book 2 is my favorite, so I am excited to see what the final cover ends up actually being. And I suppose beyond that, the only other thing is that we still know there's that mysterious 6th book that's going to be part of this deluxe set. It's apparently going to be a new book, but we know next to nothing about it at this point. So I doubt they'll include that one out of sequence, so we'll probably still go through the other 2 books before we ever hear about that. Next piece of news is going to be some interesting new product announcements. So from Magpie Games, who make role-playing board games, we got this announcement here: new RPG set in the world of Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Legend of Korra. Magpie Games inks deal with Viacom CBS Consumer Products for role-playing game based on Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. And of course, the clarification here, of course, is that it's a board game, it's not a video game. The amount of comments on this post of people thinking it's a video game were pretty crazy. It's a pretty standard one here. They basically just talk about how happy they are to have the license, bring it to a role-playing game for the first time, and all that sort of stuff. It is both franchises here, Avatar and Korra. The main piece of information here is that they give sort of an example of what they're kind of planning, is that this role-playing game is a unique opportunity for fans of the show to return to a beloved setting, this time as heroes of the story, rising to meet their destiny. Players will make characters using playbooks, templates that help players build and play compelling protagonists in the world of Avatar and Korra. Together they might protect local merchants from the triple threat triad in Republic City, travel through a spirit portal to rescue a child taken into the spirit world, negotiate peace between feuding communities within the Earth Kingdom, or pursue mysteries and villains that arise throughout their adventure. The role-playing game's core book is slated for a February 2022 release, with 2 supplements to follow in August 2022 and February 2023, titled Republic City and The Spirit World, respectively. So, no overly clear information about this. I think the only extra information is just that the style of this role-playing game system will be the same as the system they've used in their other games. So I think that just means that if you've played some of Magpie Games' other role-playing games, you'll be very easily able to adapt over to the style they're going to be doing for Avatar and Korra. This definitely got people excited when it got announced, because obviously these are just growing more and more popular, these role-playing games, especially with how popular streaming is and so on. And Avatar is definitely like a great franchise for that to work with. I'm actually excited to, even though I'm not particularly into these games myself, just get the book to see the details that they cover, because like these games typically go a little bit into detail in the lore so that a story can actually work properly. And I'm excited to see, if there's anything new going on with this, or if it is just, what we know about Avatar and then just game rules applied to that. But what are your thoughts on this Magpie Games announcement?
Yeah, no, I think this is definitely an interesting one, and it's something that hasn't been done before for the franchise. So it should be interesting to see how it's translated. I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting that it is sort of a tabletop role playing game, which definitely has a lot of popularity and various people, and I can think of back when I was younger when that was more of a popular thing to do as well. So it should be interesting to see how people do this, how I'm sure there'll be like coordinated games of people playing this online and stuff like that. So even if it isn't a video game, I'm sure there'll be some way for people to sort of explore this, or see other people playing this game. So that should be interesting to see what other people do as far as showing off this content, even if you're not particularly interested in playing it yourself, which I don't think I particularly would be. But the idea that they are making the book, like you said, that speaks to some level of depth and creativity that they're gonna have to have in order to translate the world into the format that they're used to doing for the game. And the fact that there are going to be like you said, 2 supplement books with it, should be interesting to see. So I'm curious to see how it actually turns out, and how well it's received by people who are actually really into this type of thing.
Yeah, like even if the game maybe doesn't turn out that great, just I suppose having a book with sort of that information, like having some sort of a like character creation system, is just a cool thing in general to have. Like even if we don't on like the podcast like ever play the game, like it'd be cool to cover like, oh, this is the character I came up with, this is the character you came up with.
Yeah.
It's going to be something different and interesting. And I'm excited. Like a Spirit World supplement book. I wonder if there's any like interesting information there. That could be cool. So there's that. And then continuing on the board game side of things, we go from sort of unreleased board games that haven't come out yet to games that basically got like announced and released at like the exact same time, highlighting, I suppose, just really under the radar stuff. So 2 Avatar: The Last Airbender board games, both seemingly only available from Box Lunch. One of them is called Oh My Cabbages board game, and the Iroh game is called something like Iroh's Dream board game or something like that. Uncle Iroh's Dream. Both games are made by Golden Bell Studios, who we've heard about before, like 2-3 years ago, announced they had the Avatar license. They were going to make games and plushes, and we hadn't heard anything since. If you go to their website, you're not going to find anything about these games, but you will find that they do have an Appa plushie available at 2 different sizes. Not really sure if they're actually in stock or not, and some people have been saying that Golden Bell aren't really the best company, but people from Box Lunch have got both of these games. But the general impression seems to be that there's not much to them. The Iroh game, which of course Iroh's on the cover, it sounds pretty cool, seems really, really basic in that it just seems like you have a bunch of cards, and I suppose you use them as ideas to just craft a story together. I don't know the specifics in that. I haven't really seen people play it, but it looks to pretty much just be a thing where like you get paper, it comes with like a pencil or something like that, and you just draw a few cards and try and create an avatar story from the cards that you have. And I'm guessing there's some sort of an actual game to it beyond just creativity, but it doesn't seem all that incredible. On the other hand, the Cabbage Merchant game, from what I've heard, is actually like relatively complicated, and it's kind of like a Monopoly type thing almost. And people are saying like it has like a bunch of like systems all over the place, and that like there's a fighting system, there's like a money system in it, and it's kind of potentially even like difficult to play. There is actually a picture up on Box Lunch of like all the different pieces and stuff that you get, and there's a lot going on here. Again, lots of cards, multiple different types of money and icons and stuff like that. The art seems nice, but again, it seems like mostly stock imagery. But it's something. They're cheap games, like they're both like $20 or something like that. But I wouldn't really put these two in the same category as the potential that like the Magpie Games game has. But do you have any thoughts on these two board games from Golden Bell?
Not too much. I mean, it's cool that we're getting stuff, I suppose, but it doesn't quite seem like there's a lot of depth per se in these ones. And the art being, from what I can tell, mostly stock as well. Doesn't sort of lend it to just sort of getting it for the art either.
Next piece of news is some action figure news. So we'd heard about Loyal Subjects having the Avatar license as well. There were going to be Avatar figures as part of their Best Action toy line. And they showed a prototype image on Instagram of the Aang in its box. So it's a kind of weird thing in that it looks like it's completed packaging and all the pieces that you get, but completely like unpainted. So it's all like basically grey prototype stuff here. But it looks pretty cool. They're going to be doing a Book 1 Aang, who's going to come with his staff, a Momo, it looks like 2 extra head or face swaps, and then a couple of hand pieces as well. Oh, and yeah, you just posted an image of the finished version. Okay, so this is my first time actually seeing this. But I suppose while I look at this, Greg, what are your thoughts on the fact that they showed the full grey prototype there?
Yeah, no, I think I don't know, it's interesting seeing the prototype, and especially because they have it in the packaging, it kind of makes it a little bit hard to see. But it looks like, I mean, the fact that it has all these different pieces to it and you can actually see the articulation that it has, is that part I think is pretty cool. So you can actually get an idea of how it's actually going to be posed, which is something that I think from a lot of the other ones that we've gotten already or that we know are coming, we didn't quite get to see. So that part I think is actually cool. Just the way that they're sort of showing it off seems a bit sort of odd in the fact that it's a little bit hard to see with like the sort of reflections in general, and just the way that they took the picture, since you can see them in like the reflection of the actual picture.
But yeah, the prototype, yeah, you get a sense for the joints and how exactly it looks, and then yeah, this actual completed prototype here looks quite good, like painted pretty nicely, pretty accurate. The face seems solid, if maybe his smile looks a little odd, but it does come with multiple faces, as we can see from the prototype. The only thing that's potentially unclear is that, at least in the prototype image, the 2 extra faces that aren't on the body look kind of the same. In that they look like big wide open grins, and it's hard to tell which one of them this one is. But it looks nice, and the fact that like surely they can't get 3 faces wrong. There will be at least one really, really nice one in there. And yeah, all the hands you need, again, most of the parts that you'd want. No bending effect, but given that this is sort of like a toy line of toy lines rather than just an Avatar toy line, you sort of expect that they wouldn't go through a lot of effort to, design bending parts, when at most we're maybe looking at seeing 5-6 figures over the run of this line. Like I don't think we're going to go that deep on Avatar characters, just because, they showed off the Aang with like Buffy and Angel, and they're doing Full Metal Alchemist and like bands and stuff like that. So there's a lot of figures here, but this looks really good. and it looks quite a bit better just like as an action figure than the Diamond Select figures that we've had so far. It just looks more usable as a figure. The thing I really want to know is, just because of the book 1 design, is how flexible is the sort of orange sort of, bit over his shoulders. On the Diamond Select Wave 1 figure, they chose a way too like tough material, and it's basically non-flexible almost, so it's just locked into position. This looks like it's more rubbery, but again, it probably will have to be more of an in-hand thing to see exactly how that goes. If you try and move his hand up a little bit more, does the whole piece come with it, or is it really flexible and it won't ruin the whole look of the figure? But I like what I'm seeing so far, and if you look at the comments on some of these posts from them, they have actually replied, and they mentioned that they are going to be doing other figures. There is going to be more Avatar figures, and they confirmed some specifics about the articulation, that they're like improved over the first wave and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm actually quite excited for this. It's maybe a little bit unfortunate that like probably our best action figure so far is in a line where we probably won't see too many of them, but I actually kind of like that as well, that they're only going to be doing like the really important characters, and there won't be too much to go Avatar complete on loyal subject stuff. So I like it. What are your thoughts now that we've seen, I suppose, the painted image as well?
Yeah, I think now that we see the painted one, I think it's a lot more, it gives you a lot better perspective on it. And this one, just like you said, with the way that we can see how it's posed, or the way that it can be posed, to me, makes me, have a lot more, just, I don't know, success or just hype for this one in terms of people sort of like actually liking it and being able to do stuff with it. It will be interesting to see sort of how the top part works. Like you mentioned, it does seem like it does have some range of motion, at least in terms of comparing the prototype that has the arms down to the one where the arms actually up and it has the color and everything. So it looks like it has some range, but yeah, it will be interesting to see how flexible that material is. And yeah, I think it is the other thing with the mouth that is interesting, because that's the only thing that does look a little bit wide. I mean, I don't know, it seems like their type of figures are more toyish rather than sort of, perfectly on sort of model, which is something that we're always sort of like making comments about. So that might just sort of be sort of the style that they have for their line in general, although the one that they have in the prototype does have, the mouth sort of more closed in, sort of like the neutral pose, or the neutral face pose, and that one looks, pretty, normal to what we would typically see. So it's just definitely looking pretty cool, and it definitely seems like it's going to be one of the potential better ones that we have, at least as of yet.
Yeah, and then I'll definitely say, even though it is a kind of more wide grin again, it's not as wide as the Diamond Select Wave 1 and grin, which is pretty scary at times to look at.
It's true.
They're improving over Diamond Select anyway. Of course, I think the action figure hype is still more around McFarlane, and whenever they announce their Avatar and Korra figures, they'll be very interesting to see, now that this is sort of what they have to go off. Again, I want to see more pictures of this. I'd like to see sort of an in-hand like review and stuff like that of this Aang, but this is now the sort of thing to measure against, not just Diamond Select. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, these are coming to, it seems like they're exclusive to Target in the US in April, so not too far away. And then in the comments they talk about, in terms of other countries, they're working to make sure they are properly distributed. And I like that they did.
That's good.
They did specifically mention even that like they're working with a new company to make sure they're available in like the UK. So that's really good. So they're really trying to get this out there as a relatively new line that's only one wave in, I think, so far. So that's pretty cool. Next up, Avatar: The Last Airbender 2022 Collector's Edition Wall Calendar, with 13 all-new exclusive watercolor illustrations plus bonus print. So it's a little bit of a lie, I suppose, ultimately, that it's 13 all new pieces and that they're not really new, but where they were used previously is a little bit obscure unless you keep track of everything Avatar related. So it's going to be $15.99. It's coming out July 13th, 2021. And of course, the artist is Jung Shan, who is the cover artist for The Rise of Kyoshi and The Shadow of Kyoshi. So that explains why we've sort of seen this art before. It is the Kyoshi cover artist with doing all of these pieces of art. As for where we've seen these before, I think it's a German Blu-ray set.
Yeah.
They had like a booklet that basically featured nearly all of these pieces of art. I think there is going to be like one or two pieces that we haven't seen before, in that the Kyoshi that they mention here as one of the characters who's going to be here, I don't actually think we've seen Kyoshi before, unless they're making the mistake of the Suki that there is an image of, thinking that that's Kyoshi, which I doubt they'd have made that mistake. So it makes sense that there probably will be a new Kyoshi image, unless they're going to reuse the cover.
Yeah.
Which they might. I don't know. They show a sample of the Ozai, and I do sort of wonder, like, will that fit? Because that Kyoshi image, like, is relatively small, and it's not like a full shot like maybe some of these other pieces we've seen. So I don't know. I think they do confirm that there probably is one new piece at least, which will probably be the print. Featuring Aang, Katara, Zuko, Toph, Kyoshi. You can look online and find what most of the other pieces are going to be. It also says there's going to be a planner page for September to December 2021, so I guess you can use it straight away. And bonus print of a watercolor illustration. So this actually got people quite excited. I was a little bit surprised by it, but also this is a very usable item. Features nice new art, not just stock art. This is a really cool thing for fans of the Kyoshi books as well as Avatar in general. Something they've probably needed to do for a while now. Hopefully this can continue. But what are your thoughts on this calendar?
Yeah, I think it's cool. I think out of everything that they've announced so far, I don't know, I guess it doesn't surprise me that this is getting that much hype, just because it, like you said, it's an actual usable thing that, even after, the 12 months or whatever, you can still, have it around as just a general sort of art piece. And it's something that you'll, potentially actually look at, more often than not. I think out of everything they have announced, as of late, this is something that I would actually be interested in getting, just for the fact that, I can actually use it. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, it's interesting that they're saying exclusive, and a lot of the art is already out there, so you can see what pretty much most of them are going to look like, unless they do something different. Which I don't think they're going to, but I think the art that we've seen of it looks really cool. Whatever they do that is potentially going to be new should be interesting as well. And, it's not like most people would know that this is already sort of out there. So I think, regardless of if it's, been used before, I think this is probably a good reuse of it if there ever was one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like all the images we have here say design not final, so unless they literally just have used art that this artist has done before and they are saying it will be all new, which is possible, because I suppose it turns out that the Avatar cookbook, the preview images are all just completely preview stuff. Like, it is going to be all completely newly designed. The author did say that. So, these companies at times do just completely mock stuff up, but we'll see what all new specifically means in the coming months. But it's not too far away. It is available on Amazon right now, and I suppose it'll be available in more places as the weeks progress. I think it was literally just announced. And on this one, I think, funnily enough, I think I might have been like potentially the first one to spot this, so that was kind of fun. There's that. Next piece of news is kind of more on the negative side of things, but both paperbacks for the Kyoshi novels, so Rise of Kyoshi and Shadow of Kyoshi, which were originally scheduled to be out in just a few months, have been delayed, both again to the same date, delayed until May 17th, 2022. Really, really long delay, nearly a full year again. And for the Rise of Kyoshi paperback, that means it suffered nearly 2 years worth of delays, because that book was originally meant to come out like a week or two before the Shadow of Kyoshi came out, and now they've both been heavily delayed. No reason given, just a date change. Not really sure why, but again, this is kind of what's happened before with Abrams' books. There was obviously the audiobook scheduling stuff as well that was kind of weird, so not unexpected. I don't know, maybe this is still like a COVID thing of like they're prioritizing new books over paperback re-releases, but I think a lot of people would like to see a cheaper copy of this book out there, because the ebook still isn't particularly available outside of the US, I don't believe. Not everyone likes audiobooks, and the hardcover at times has been tricky to find, especially right when Shadow of Kyoshi came out, and right during like the Netflix hype and stuff like that. So, you know, more copies of the book being out there is a good thing. So I don't get why they're so heavily delaying the paperback. The only speculation myself and other people have had about this is that, are they delaying this to potentially coincide with whenever the next novel is happening in some way? But again, there's no news whatsoever about new novels. But, you know, we're grasping at straws here. What are your thoughts on this? Heavy delays for both of these books.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is quite unfortunate because it does seem like a good amount of people are looking forward to it, and just because it is, the paperback version just inherently is a cheaper version than the hardback, which is usually more expensive just because of the materials around it. I don't know, I always find it interesting that the hardback comes out first, and that's like, the one that you really have to spend a lot of money on and have to like really go for it to actually get, versus just sort of the one that more people might actually attempt to get. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think that's definitely unfortunate, just because it is hard to get for a lot of people.
Yeah. Like, I've been waiting for these paperbacks just because I want to have like a copy of the book where I can actually just like go in and like highlight sections and like not have to worry about keeping it looking nice and stuff like that. And I don't want to get another copy of the hardcover just to do that with. But yeah, it's still coming out. Not sure why they've delayed it, because they don't explain these things, of course. Next up, we get into, I suppose, more speculative, like, is it news, is it not news? So this one is Viacom CBS are going to be holding a online streaming event on February 24th, where I believe the idea behind this is that this is where they're going to be announcing a lot of the shows that are going to be on their Paramount Plus streaming platform. Now, the reason this is potentially of interest to Avatar fans is, of course, the CEO at one of the previous investor meetings talked about how Avatar is one of the franchises where they sort of value and could use in the future to back up their streaming platform. So there is something behind potentially there being an announcement here, but there's been no official rumors to suggest anything is actually going to happen here. But if they're announcing a bunch of new stuff, I don't know if there's been rumors about other stuff that might be announced at this, so it's hard to say. Is it all secrets or not? Because again, Star Wars a few months ago had a big streaming announcement thing, and most of that stuff wasn't exactly rumored, and it was fully new. So there is a potential for an Avatar show announcement here. And a reasonable amount of like hardcore fans are kind of thinking like, maybe it might happen. It's hard to say though. I don't really know. This is not necessarily the thing I want to get super hyped up about, but if it happens, it's a big thing. Really, really big thing. Huge announcement if it does happen, and this type of event is where it would happen, I would guess. But what are your thoughts on this? Do you think there's any hope of an Avatar announcement at this thing?
I mean, I guess there's hope, but I wouldn't particularly put a lot of stock in it yet. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess, if you look at enough things online and enough people, moving around for jobs and stuff like that, I'm sure you could probably, put something together where you could see, more of a likely possibility of there being a show or just an announcement of one. Like, it'd be pretty hard to be like, oh, we're going to launch this with this unless, they were doing a really, really good job of keeping under wraps, which they could. Companies do have the potential to do that. So, it's possible. But, I don't know. I think, the fact that they mentioned before, makes it, interesting to sort of just speculate in general, regardless of what they do. But, it will be on their platform, the original shows regardless. So that's always something to look forward there.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Once this platform launches, if a new Avatar show does eventually get announced, it's going to be on this thing. I don't think there's really any doubt about that, because in the few videos they've put out highlighting what will be on the platform already in terms of shows that have already come out, there's clips from Avatar and Korra in it. So Avatar and Korra are going to be on this platform when it launches. And obviously it's new shows that are the thing that really drive people to these platforms primarily, because like just Avatar and Korra, it's already on Netflix. People already have Netflix. Why should they go switch over to this when Avatar is available already? They need a new show like that to drive attention, and based on what they said before, it's clear that they see Avatar as a show, a franchise that can really bring people in. I suppose to a degree, do they treat it like, say, The Mandalorian is to Disney Plus? We'll have to wait and see on that. But I think for most people it probably could be and should be considered that, compared to, I suppose, some of the stuff that they might end up actually announcing. There'd be so much more hype behind Avatar. Now, it is notable, their tweet, I'd say there's about 10 comment threads on this, and 5 of them are like, bring back Avatar, do something Avatar. So the hype behind this is kind of like Avatar fans mainly, but there's no basis really to think that it's going to happen right now. But things are maybe starting to align for a series happening at some point. Mike and Brian have not been working on the Netflix show for the last 6 or so months. What have they been doing in the last 6 months? Because they said in their post they're going to be working on Avatar, and as far as we're aware, that has resulted in Brian doing sketches that are going to be in the art books as like the new pages, and he's doing the covers for the new art books. But what's like Mike doing? Is it the Korra comic or what? What's holding back the announcement on the Korra comic? And where's Mike and Brian's involvement in things? We don't know. So there's stuff like that that's kind of like interesting. But I'd be very surprised if we do a podcast, say, next week covering third show has been announced. Now, I might be completely wrong about that. I'd love to be able to say podcast next week covering this big announcement, but I don't really think it will be. So there's that. Final thing is pure rumor. I don't know how confirmed or not this is. The only reason I'm covering this here is because it is potentially the first actual information about the live action Avatar show from Netflix. Again, the source that this comes from isn't the best. They've been right about some things, they've made up other things in the past. The main details here seem to be that Albert Kim is going to be the new showrunner, who's worked on shows like Sleepy Hollow, Leverage, and Nikita. The series will feature 10-hour-long episodes. I guess that's the first season's going to be 10-hour-long episodes. And they do apparently reveal some information about the characters, which is probably the most interesting thing here. Character ages. Katara will be 16, and Sokka will be 14. Aang will remain 12. And it says, as a side note, this is the characters' ages, not necessarily the actor ages. And this will probably be the ages at the start of the show. So, big changes there in that Katara apparently is going to be the older sibling in this series, and it also puts an extra 2 years in the age gap between Katara and Aang, which this has been the main talking point from this article, of course, because it makes the changes seem needless because it seems like the only thing they affect is like the shipping aspect of the show. That this is kind of like, oh, is this why Michael Bryan left? Because the Netflix people wanted maybe Katara and Zuko rather than Katara and Aang, when, that's Katara Aang is like the main relationship. Not really sure, but that's what everyone's kind of interpreting this as. That to me seems like a needless change. I don't see why you need to do that at all. But Greg, what are your thoughts on these rumors about the live action show?
I don't know what to quite make of this. I mean, it's interesting that this is what is coming out when we haven't really heard anything at all before. So I wonder, like we mentioned in the beginning of this, how, verified this can actually be seen as like a rumor as opposed to sort of like the Funko Pop rumors that we know are typically more accurate versus, more media news, which is usually held more, in secret overall, at least until it's like closer to actual production, and then stuff starts leaking out, mainly because, things are actually seen by other people that aren't part of the actual production and stuff. So it's interesting that this is coming out, and from as far as we know, this is like really early stuff. Like we don't know mainly like anything else about sort of like the main production of this. So it's interesting that this is coming out now, and what we're seeing as the potential ages, and how that could actually change the dynamic of the show. Which, I mean, if that's potentially one of those creative differences, then maybe that's sort of why things went down the way that they did. But this is definitely interesting news to hear for sure.
Yes. So, yeah, there's that, and that's all the news. Like, a lot of stuff there, but most of it is like products that are coming out in a few months, reprint books, action figure news. Still not the news we really want. Like, where is the core comic announcement? I think remains the main kind of topic of debate. I hope they announce it before the end of the month, because suddenly that means it probably won't be announced for like an August release, which means it'll probably be like September at the earliest if they do eventually announce it. Who knows though. So from there we'll go into our actual main topic here, which is that Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy came out earlier this week, and we are going to be doing a full-on review here. So yeah, name of the book is Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy. The creative team is Faith Erin Hicks as the writer and Peter Wortman as the artist. And the colors are by Adele Matera, lettering by Richard Starkings, and Comic Craft's Jimmy Betancourt. So this is the second of 3 one-shots that covered the theme, the awesome ladies of Avatar. So we had Katara and the Pirate Silver, now we have Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy, and then the next one in, I think it's June, is Suki Alone, and then we'll see what they do with one-shots going forward. So yeah, we'll be going through this page by page, but we'll start with some general thoughts on the book to get us going. So Greg, we'll start with you. Overall, what were your thoughts on Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy?
Overall, I thought it was a fun story to be had. I think it's interesting seeing, Toph in a more sort of mature format, even though, like most of our characters, they are still, quite young at this point. But, you definitely get to see a different side of her character that we haven't seen throughout the show, and sort of, reflecting on sort of, what has happened, up until this point and where she's currently sort of established. So I think there's definitely some interest there in terms of where her character is being portrayed in this story overall. I think it might be, a bit of a downer because this is sort of, a singular story, so it is focused on primarily just her. Despite, some of the other characters do, sort of showing up in the story. So that is, something to, I guess, consider in terms of just, this, particular story and the format that at least we're currently going down. So, I think it's a fun little single story here that I think, is moving, maybe some things along, mainly just with her character, not overall story wise or anything like that. Is very contained, and any sort of, I guess longer, standing ramifications that would come from this, wouldn't be seen for quite a while, if ever.
Yeah, with me, like, I agree. Like, the book is fun, it's fine, good, nice, but I don't feel that strongly about it. Like, I can't say like it's excellent or anything like that. It's better than Guitar and the Pirate Silver, but that's not really saying all that much. It's like Guitar and the Pirate Silver was like absolute middle of the road, like 6 out of 10, like just good enough to be good. This is only a little bit of a step forward than that. I think it's still the same style of story ultimately to that, in that there's not really that many takeaways of note from this as such. And a lot of like the marketing behind it, like, oh, Sokka and Suki are going to be in it, and it's kind of like, yeah, they're here, but they don't really do that much. It really is the Toph stuff that is the focus. And I think the fact that you can say that when the book introduces a new lava bender character speaks to, they did some stuff right here in terms of like the arc, the little themes they touch on with Toph are nice, and we'll get into them. But then it feels very throwaway, including a lava bender here, just with how they do that story and ending, in my opinion, right as like, no, show us what happens next with him. That's the interesting thing, not the introduction to him. So yeah, kind of middle of the road. Like, look, I have full confidence Suki alone is going to be like much better. That's going to be notable, interesting, and I think the problem probably with the first two one shots is that you don't necessarily need to do one shots about the absolute main characters, because they get enough focus in the main stories. So it feels like they're almost like grasping at straws to try and find something to give them like a little bit of development. Whereas at least with Suki, you've got so much wide open space to work with that anything they do is going to be notable about the character pretty much. And I think that's what's the case with this book is. The general opinion that I've seen on my video, Reddit and stuff like that has been that most people are kind of like, yeah, better than Guitar and the Pirate Silver, but yeah, there's not much here. And that, 8 months of Avatar comics and we haven't really done anything. And so far, the switch to one-shots, the move specifically away from continuing the main story, hasn't really been a success. Especially when that decision that apparently came from Mike and Brian still hasn't been explained properly yet. But we'll get into it. We'll go through it page by page here and get into the details. So we open up at Toph Beifong's Metalbending Academy. She's leading a class, and it's a really big class. There's a lot of students now in the academy. She's telling them to take their stances. They're metal bending some coins, of course, and they all seem to be able to do that. They're able to levitate metal coins. They're able to stretch them out, move them around. Standard, basic metal bending, kind of as we've seen. It's a reference to, I suppose, the initial training her main three students did, and she notes that it's perfect. She's then notified that Sokka and Suki are at the academy entrance, and she's happy about this. And she notes that finally it took you long enough to visit. So I suppose we'll pause there and just cover the initial intro here of just the main takeaway being that the academy has clearly grown from the Rift, because this comic is set sometime after the Rift, but we're not quite at the North and South stuff yet, I think. So we've seen the growth of the academy, because I think in the Rift they noted that it was growing enough, but they didn't have space for the students to stay, and there was like tents and huts outside. Now there's like full-on buildings, so it's a marked improvement with the academies. But what are your thoughts on this opening here?
Yeah, I think it's, it sets the stage well enough in terms of just, how the academy's actually doing, or how the students in the academy are actually doing. I mean, just, from their attire, you can tell that, things are a lot more organized than it was before. It looks a lot more formal. It looks like sort of like, the other, sort of firebending sort of academy that, they sort of had the competition with a long time ago. So it's nice to see, I guess, the progress here. And you can definitely see that, Toph isn't, despite it doing well, isn't quite, as excited as you might think, at least from these initial panels.
And so they get into here, like, covering this. That's immediately what Sokka and Suki talk about. Wasn't this all broken down? Rock tents just a few months ago. You've really upgraded the place. The Earth and Fire Industries sponsoring the academy. She could afford to have these new facilities built. And that obviously is all because of what happened during the events of the Rift. The money coming in means she can offer metal bending training for free, and her students don't have to sleep on the ground. Again, Rift reference there. Suki notes that you've accomplished so much here, it's truly amazing. And she's just like, yeah, it's pretty great. And of course, Sokka and Suki immediately see that she's not particularly happy about this success, but why? And that's the big question in the book, really. So is there a reason why you're acting like things are not fine? Anything we should know? And she just says, it's nothing, everything's great, the academy is great, the students are great, everything's just peachy. But, and she screams out, I'm bored. There's no challenge anymore, the school practically runs itself. Her original metal bending students, Hotun Penga and the Dark One, teach the beginner classes. I have scouts that search the Earth Kingdom for more metal benders, assistants who make sure all the bills are paid. The place runs like clockwork. For her herself, she just wakes up, eats, teaches, and goes back to bed. Very boring, simple, successful. And she just notes that, yep, she needs a shake-up in her routine. And so Suki says that they're going to take her to a concert. And Toph is very concerned about this. So here's sort of the premise of the book presented. Despite the success of the academy, it's boring for Toph, who's usually pretty rebellious and likes action and fighting, which she's had in her life so far, both before she met the team and during her time with the team. What are your thoughts on this setup here?
No, I think the setup works well. I mean, this, seems in line with what, potentially could, affect Toph as, her core character being, like we've said, more action-oriented, more sort of in the throes of things. And, here this is, quite, a slowdown period here, especially now that things are actually working almost pretty seamlessly with the Metal Bending Academy here. Just a whole idea of it just sort of being on loop basically from day in and day out. And, she definitely does need a shakeup, which is, I guess, a nice timing that her friends are here.
Mm-hmm. So we immediately cut to basically, I suppose, the big concert hall where this is going to take place. And this is where Sokka and Suki have to basically introduce who's playing, because Toph hasn't met this character, but Sokka has, and Suki is a big fan of them. And it's obviously Chong and the other nomads as well. So he notes, this is how he tells the story. Before he met you, Katara, Aang, and I got stuck in a cave near Omashu. It turned out the cave was actually a secret tunnel. There was a song about it, sung by a group of wandering musicians who were also trapped in the cave that was actually a secret tunnel. And Suki continues and says, and those same musicians went on to form the most amazing band whose music is taking the Earth Kingdom by storm. And Sokka and I have tickets to see them tonight. And Toph is just like, you were trapped in a cave with those people. I know you're going to pay money to hear them sing. And it's just that, he's just here to support Suki. Suki's the big fan, and we can see she is so excited about this. She knows all of their songs off by heart, and Sokka just notes that they have too many songs, way too many songs. They have front row tickets here, and we find out that the name of the band is Trustfully in Love. And Suki's excited to see them live, and they drag her in, and she's not happy about this at all. So interesting stuff here. This is really it when it comes to any sort of like stuff with Sokka and Suki in the book. They'll come back right at the end, but this is as far as it goes. That Sokka is in this book because he is the one who is the most familiar with Chong going into this book and doesn't like him. And then to present a slightly more positive side of things, Suki is introduced as being a major fan of their music, and that's really it. I wish we had seen a little bit more with these two involved maybe throughout, because it feels like they're just here to act as like a marketing tagline to get people excited, and then it feels a little bit like they weren't used all that well. I get Toph needed the introduction here, because she wasn't in the episode where he was in, because it was before she joined the team, but I think it could have been better done, even though I like this extra dynamic on Suki, that here's like a weird quirk to her personality, that like she wasn't particularly into how Sokka was so into the play, but here she is being sort of the fangirl for a band that Sokka's not into. It's just like the reverse of that. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as far as like the setup here, it works well. The dynamic's interesting, the fact that Sokka, has no interest in the band at all, and Suki's, really into it. Like you said, it's a nice play off of each other, and, Toph is definitely with, Sokka here as far as, not being into it at all. So, it's a nice setup, but yeah, like you said, this is, the only time that we really see them, and until like the end, what is it, the last 4 or 5 pages. So their overall use in this, I don't know, maybe it was just too much hype around them being in this, or just sort of, I don't know, this, the way that they structured this, because I mean, it seems like they could have been, in some of the other parts if some other things were, sort of reordered or something like that. Because, Chong does come back later on, and does have, a role. So, maybe that could have been, set up a different way. But, as far as the band itself, they do their job here. And it's interesting just to see, their progression, I guess. So that's an interesting note in itself.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, ultimately the way this book goes is that they introduce Toph to Chong so she can have a kind of one-on-one with him later on in the book. And I kind of wonder if, could you not just have had that be sort of more of a group discussion and had Sokka and Suki be there? Like, did it really have to be one-on-one between Toph and Chong, given that, you could have introduced something with Sokka and Suki to also give their perspective on the theme they're going for of, when your passion becomes sort of just day to day, like pretty normal, does it and it begins to sort of take away from the interest you had in it. But we'll get into that. So we turn the page and we get immediately introduced to Chong, Lily, and Moku. They are together, trustfully in love, and tonight they want to invite all of you to trust fully in love. And so they start singing. Their first song is a little song that he wrote about a little dude that he met a long time ago, a dude with an arrow on his head. I kind of forgot the words to this song, but it goes like this. We just montage sort of here really quickly. 3 hours later, the concert is still going on. People are swaying back and forth, and everyone's into it except Sokka and Toph. So Toph eventually decides she's had enough. She leaves, and Suki's like, Toph, wait, you're going to miss the interpretive dance section. And Sokka screams at her, like, no, don't leave me here. And she just walks out into the night here of the town. And she senses something in the ground with her seismic sense. And she says, what is that? It's earthbending, but not. So, what were your thoughts on the, I suppose, the performance here, the actual concert here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to see how their performance is pretty much just like how they did their, sort of songs back in the caves. It's just sort of like a hodgepodge of things, yet somehow everyone seems to know their songs. So that's interesting how that works. But yeah, no, Sokka and Toph are definitely not in it, but unfortunately, Sokka gets left behind.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so from here, she basically runs through the town, following this like bending signal she's getting through her feet, and it leads her to sort of like an abandoned building. There's some people out front, so she says she's going to go around the back. She hops over the fence and goes in through a hole in the wall and finds out that it's this underground bending tournament happening here. There's a bunch of fire bending going on. People from, again, the three main nations here all watching this, surrounding it. It's not particularly high-end here. This is no Earth Rumble here. There's no real arena. It's just a circle of people to create a fighting arena. So we see some people are betting on who they think is going to win the fights. I bet on that waterbender last week. He didn't pay out. 2 firebenders are going at it as Toph enters. And she just reminisces about this. She watches some underground bending going on. and reflects on her own underground bending action, with a little bit of a flashback scene here with the boulder and her dodging one of his attacks and taking him out. And she just says, "No academy to manage, no students to train, just me in the ring. Those were the days." So she pushes through the crowd to get a better. Well, so she doesn't actually have to push through the crowd to get a better look, but she does it anyway for our sake, I suppose, is what's going on here. And sees a young boy fighting against another earthbender here, but we'll get to that in a second. So again, this is another nice bit. I like this reflection of, this is kind of what Toph wants. She kind of wants to go back to this, that, this the time of her being part of Earth Rumble is something she looks back on fondly, because this is where I suppose she properly honed her skills. The Badger Moles taught her the skills, but she had to use them against these other strong earthbenders to really get to the level that she's at. And this is this defining thing for her, and they're making the contrast here between, I suppose, the nice way all of her students are being trained and the kind of tougher way she had to train by creating a secret persona, joining this Earth Rumble, and now she's seeing that with other people happen in front of her. What are your thoughts on the underground tournament here?
Yeah, the start of the tournament is, it's interesting just to see how they have it sort of laid out, and just, the fact that, the state of the current world is where you can actually have, these sort of battles, and it doesn't, sort of erupt into, full-on war. So, you can see just, the progress that society has had in general from, the fact that they can have this with the three different nations, battling together for, monetary gain, but, it's not in terms of, like death, battles or anything like that. So it's cool to see how that's set up, and just, the fact that, Toph can, sort of reflect back on how this is very reminiscent to what she did, just that now there's, other people, other bending forms that you can go against.
Okay, so again, the fight that we see is happening currently is two earthbenders fighting against each other. The boy says that he has a name when he's called Pipsqueak, and she just says, "I don't care about your name, kid." So he dodges one of her attacks, he smashes his fist into the ground, and we get some lava bending straight away. And he says, "You should care. My name's Sun. Remember it." And Toph, sensing this, of course, is like, "Oh, up close, like, this is very, very interesting." But up close, people start to recognize Toph. And she's like, "Oh, you're the earthbender that's with the Avatar." And she thinks like, "Oh, I'm famous. I know, you're all so excited to see Toph, the greatest earthbender." And then he just screams out, "Everybody run, the man's shutting this place down." And she's like, "The man? I'm not the man. Hey, stop, I'm not your enemy. I just wanted to watch the fight." That she in no way wanted to shut this place down. She just wanted to see what was going on like anyone else. But she's famous and part of the establishment enough now where people view her as someone who would shut down like an illegal tournament like this. So very big turn of events for Toph here, being considered the man. That's like the last thing that she would ever want to be considered as. So again, just that thing happening to her is a big thing in the book to get things going here. But what are your thoughts on this, the introduction to Sun, a new lava bender, and this interesting dynamic with Toph?
Yeah, I mean, Toph, unwillingly has, helped to establish order, for, a good reason, but because of that, that definitely puts her on sort of, the more established side of things, and that's, in line with, the laws and rules that, the society currently has. So that for people who are trying to do, things outside of that, it's kind of a odd thing to see her around there now. So, it's interesting how that develops throughout the course of the whole book here. And, the fact that we do get to see a new character with a new or, newer ability that we know of course, but, isn't as established in the world as far as we know of, at least. Is definitely cool to see, even though it's really only, one quick little frame that we see of it here until later on.
Yeah, and I think Sun's interesting in the sense of like adding a lava bender adds a lot of intrigue into the book in terms of what are they going to do from here. Well, what I will say is just that Sun as a character I don't think stands out that much, and then because they don't really do all that much with lava bending. They use it to sort of be the sort of solution to Toph's problem in terms of something unique happening, but the way they sort of end the book before really tackling anything just makes it feel a little bit sort of like tacked on, like again, sort of marketing points just being added to the book to increase interest without really adding all that much to the story. But we'll get into it. We'll get into it. There's some details to it. So the next morning, back at the academy, we get reintroduced to Penga, Hotun, and the Dark One. So they're like, "Good morning, Sifu Toph," and he's just like, okay, let's get this weekly report over with. Hotun says, "I've been helping the beginner students get in touch with their deeper emotions." Great, the Dark One, you're up. "I hate teaching, so I've been avoiding my students and sending them on 10-mile hikes." Sounds good. Penga? And before she can say anything, she's just like, "Yeah, great, report over, see you next week." And they just note, "Yeah, you're a bit grumpy, Toph, more than usual. What's going on?" Penga does get a chance to say that she's been working hard with the beginner metal benders. She taught them all the beginner bending forms that Toph taught them. And yeah, you wouldn't let me tell you about it. And Dark One is like, "I hate it when Penga's emotions are the same as my own. Is the academy in trouble, Sifu Toph? Is that why you're so upset?" And she's like, "No, everything's fine. Everything's perfect. Everything's so respectable. That's the problem." And so this is where we get a little bit of one-on-one time with the students. They're wondering, okay, what do we take from her reaction to everything? Everything's going great, but... And Hotun's actually the one to sort of figure it out. Is she upset because the academy is so different from how she learned bending? And they are kind of like, why would she care about that? Sifu Toph perfected her bending skills in an underground earthbending tournament. It was a tough and difficult environment where only the strong survived. She invented metal bending, helped the Avatar end the 100-Year War, but we get to learn metal bending at the Beifong Metal Bending Academy in the lap of luxury. And the solution basically is maybe they need to experience some of this toughness as well. Maybe that will help them understand her better and so on. They do also reflect over these pages about how they've changed quite a bit since their early days meeting each other. They note how, their initial character traits that they had in the Promise, which were kind of one note, they're not as big with them anymore. Hotun's not so worried about everything anymore. The Dark One isn't always so lost and being gloomy all the time, and Penga isn't always about shopping and boys and so on. So them becoming teachers themselves has helped them personally as well. So it's a pretty nice section of the book with the students here of just they're going to go to the Underground Pro Bending Tournament to get the same experiences as Toph and show that they're just as capable, and maybe that will help Toph turn around her opinion now that she sees that the students can be just as tough as she is. Interesting enough dynamic to connect everything together. Toph's just been to the Underground Bending Tournament. They're going to go there now. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts here on this section? Kind of like the main section of the book focused on the students.
Yeah, no, I don't know, I like the fact that we're, getting more information about the students and them, reflecting on sort of what they were before and how far they've made in their own sort of progress here. I think that's something that, earlier on that we actually wish for. So it's cool that we're finally getting to see at least a little bit of it here. I don't think, there's a huge amount of sort of, development overall with them. I think, as far as where they're currently at and their sort of, I guess progression is pretty, is pretty cemented here. But you do get to see at least a little bit more of just sort of what they think of, just sort of how they're learning and, Toph in general. I think there is, a little bit of progress made with, between them and Toph by the end of the book.
Yeah, this is one of the ones where I feel this would work a little bit better if they utilized the timeline a little bit more. Like if there was more of a time skip and you got to see these characters with like a slightly different character design, show that more time has passed between their last appearance and now, then what they say would have a little bit more meaning. The problem with them still having the same general character design feels like not much time has passed, so the development is only like minor. Whereas if their designs sort of show that they're not the same sort of weird characters they were in on their first appearance, that would, I think, feel a little bit better. And just in general, I think this book would work much better in that sense as well. Um, but I think that's more of just a general, with all of the comics, kind of complaint that they are still very much glued to the year or two post ATLA timeline that we're in, where the characters aren't that much older than they were, so nothing has changed that much. But I do like this because it reflects on the fact that they were one note in the Promise, but even just by the Rift, their second appearance, they were already better developed, not as one note, more to them as characters.
Yeah.
And then by the time we get to North and South, they're like the key part of like the plan towards the end of that book, in terms of people sort of underestimating them, but Toph having the confidence that they can come in and be the turning point in the fight. And this is meant to be sort of that middle ground of like showing you how Toph gains such a heavy respect for them, basically. So I think to some people who don't like the students, this is probably a very forgettable part of the book, but I've always enjoyed them as sort of some of the more interesting and unique comic exclusive characters, and this reflection is actually a nice part of the book in my mind. So yeah, outside of I think I probably would have appreciated more like some sense of like they're all wearing like clothing that maybe shows that they're now sort of quote unquote metal bending masters training themselves. The fact that they're still wearing their like initial outfits probably is maybe the only thing that makes me kind of question a little bit. But anyway, do you have any further thoughts on the students?
No, I think that's some good points there.
Mm-hmm. So next, that night, Toph heads to the underground pro bending arena. And someone opens the door and finds her, and she's like, "Hey, is the bending tournament cancelled? Why does everyone keep running away from me?" She hears a big rumble, and then is thinking like, "Wait, is a herd of saber-toothed moose lions loose in the city?" And then she turns around and spots Chong running away from a bunch of people, screaming, "Help me!" And he says, "I know you. You're the tiny but powerful earthbender lady, the greatest earthbender in the world, Toph." Toph actually, and you're that musician Chong. So he wants Toph's help because he's being pursued by all of his crazy maniac fans. She puts up a bit of a kind of earth barrier at this point, and they all run by. They don't spot Chong, so she saves him here. "Why are you hiding? What's going on here?" And he makes a few interesting points here. "We're all hiding, powerful earthbender lady, hiding from our true selves. But you're hiding literally. Hiding, not metaphorically hiding." So yeah, their love for him is too strong. He's running away from that. And yeah, that's just the situation. He's struggling with the fame aspect of his success a bit here. And we start their just general conversation here. So he notes, "Why are you so powerful but also so sad?" And she just says, "She's not sad, that's stupid. What would I have to be sad about? People respect me so much they run away from they see me. Kids fighting in an underground bending tournament see me as some kind of enemy now. I'm going to make the Earth Kingdom's authorities magically appear and shut down everyone's fun. Don't they know I was the blind bandit? I used to be just like them." She notes how she's proud of the Beifong Metalbending Academy, but why does my life feel so routine? Why do I feel like my bending abilities aren't being challenged? I'm not inventing new bending techniques or saving the world. I'm just teaching benders how to do their stances, day after day. Meanwhile, there are kids on the streets of Udao discovering bending techniques I've never seen before. Last night, a kid did something that looked like he combined firebending and earthbending. It was amazing. Now, that used to be me, but now I'm the bender establishment." And Chong just says he gets it, and he goes into his side of the story. But we'll cover Toph's side here. So what are your thoughts here on this section where Toph meets Chong?
This is cool. I mean, I like, this is where we actually get, some character development from Toph, or at least the start of it here in terms of her, really reflecting on what she's done in the past and where she's at now and how, she really is seen like, the man, and that's not what she wants to be. So I like that, her as a character, even though she is, still quite young, all of her characters are still quite young, is able to sort of, reflect back on this and see, sort of, where she's at, and, is trying to right now understand what's the problem, what's the issue that she's having here. And this is, I guess sort of, when she's really being forced to come, face it.
Hmm. Yeah, like it is an interesting kind of point here, is that like she's used to sort of being notable and powerful in these sort of more underground ways, but now she's notable and powerful on a world stage, which she likes being considered like the best earthbender in the entire world. But with that, and her like being friends with Aang and everything else going on, that she now runs a successful school that's really, really popular, she's seen a different way, and that's the only way to do it. And it's an interesting, it's a need for growth from the character. She can't always just be the, low key best in the world. She has to acknowledge that she is the famous best in the world. So I do like this setup, and they double down on this point with Chong's story here. So we get some cool sort of kind of chibi style stuff here. I suppose it's kind of reminiscent a little bit of some of the kind of Great Divide almost style of arts at times that we've seen. So he says, back in the day, me, Lily, and Moku used to play our music because it was what we did. Man, we were all about the love of music. But then the love became something else. It became a way to earn a living. And that can mess with love, man. Last night, we played our music for hundreds of people in this city. It's awesome we get to touch so many hearts. But afterwards, I saw this kid playing music in the street, and I wanted to be that kid, man. No money, no fans. All that kid had was the love of his music, just like how it was when me, Lily, and Moku met our man Sokka. When the music you make, because you love it becomes music you make because it's your job, it changes how you feel about the music. Powerful earthbender lady. And she says, so why don't you go back to doing it for love? And he says, because there's one thing that's great about being paid for our music. What's that? Me, Lily, and Moku get to sleep indoors every night. I don't miss sleeping on the cold hard ground. I like beds and pillows. And Toph agrees with this. They're the greatest. When I'm snuggled in a comfy bed in the middle of winter, I tell myself, Chong, maybe it's okay to play music for other things than love, man. That's a good point, but it's coming from you. It's a surprise, but it's a good point. Wisdom can come from unexpected places. So yeah, he doesn't want to get chased anymore, and she agrees to help him out and basically sort of be his bodyguard for the next little bit. So this is Chong's side of that story, getting across this idea of, the thing that you're passionate about, if you turn it into the thing that helps you make money, it drains some of the excitement, the entertainment, the passion away. And is that okay or not? Should you go back to just doing things the way it was before and lose the sort of money aspect? It applies to both stories, both Chong's and Toph's. That Toph is sort of using her skill here to run an academy to, be successful and make money, but it's making her almost too well known, and she wishes she could go back to the old days where she could be the underground blind bandit, still incredible, acknowledged, respected, but not as well known. And they're weighing up the pros and cons of each side. But I did actually like the nuance here of Chong, of all characters who you think wouldn't care about attachments that much, actually being like, but no, I really do value that us being successful with our music allows us to not have to just sleep on the ground like nomads every night. We like sleeping in beds. And so he even acknowledges that he can't just always do it out of love, and there's sometimes that need for it as well. So, realistic as well as, kind of meaningful, kind of profound as well. So what were your thoughts on this? This is like the real thematic core of the book here.
Yeah, no, I like this. I like the comparison of both of their stories. I like Chong, sort of being the one to actually mention this, which, like you said, you wouldn't think that he would be, sort of this such of aware of, sort of the situation and have this sort of wisdom, which I don't know. I think the wisdom side, it kind of makes sense in an odd way that he might be able to sort of see this for what it is, even if he is sort of, seemingly all about the music and all about, just sort of the feel and the flow of things, which is probably what, most of our initial impressions of him and his group actually are. So, I like that he's a bit more, down to earth here. And I think that's, it works well with, this sort of understanding that Toph is sort of gathering here.
Hmm. Yeah, this is perhaps a moment where, like, I would have actually liked to have seen, like, Sokka react to Toph actually sort of just getting on well with Chong. That, like, he still is just the only one who doesn't get why people are, like, drawn to Chong. But they didn't decide to do that. But next, we return to the Metalbending students who are also out looking for the underground bending tournament. Ho Tun is the one who obviously proposed this idea, and he's really behind it. Penga and the Dark One are still kind of like, why are we doing this? And Penga notes that you want to do it. He makes his point again that, Toph will respect us more if we do something similar to the way she's done it. And Penga logically points out that I know we don't really know what's going on with Toph right now, but she wouldn't keep us around unless she valued us, unless she thought it was worth her time. She's not very patient, so she's kept us around. It's not personal what's going on here. Dark One agrees with this. But the point here from Hotun is, it's not just about Sifu Toph. I want to do this to prove to myself that I've really changed, and I'll never see Doom again. You don't have to come. If you don't want to, I'd understand. But they're both not going to let the other member of their team go and do this alone. So the three of them are going to be together on this. And again, I like this sort of development here. It gives Hotun a chance to sort of stand out a little bit on his own here, kind of making a decision for the group and them actually going along with it, even though they aren't fully behind it in the same way that he is. And that's kind of fitting. He's maybe the one who maybe has the least confidence, and this also he wants to be a sort of confidence booster thing to show that they have changed. They are good metal benders as well. So what are your thoughts on this moment with the students?
I like this, and the fact that Hotun was such about sort of the doom and gloom. He's one who's trying to be brave, as he mentions again later on. I think is this is probably the most direct character development that we're sort of getting for him, and just I guess them in general, but specifically for him.
Mm-hmm. We then cut back to Toph and Chong. She's making sure it's all clear. She has her seismic sense to keep track of where everyone is. Chong mentions here, you're so good at this. Have you thought about becoming some kind of Yu-Dao protector lady? And she says, what, like put on a mask and make my job to save musicians from their fans? And he says, sure, why not? Now, this is the one point in the book where it's like, oh, here's Chong suggesting you're good at basically being a bodyguard. Why don't you become a protector overall? It's a very, very early sort of police officer suggestion. Still, I think it's nothing more than a reference in that Toph doesn't really seem to take much of this on board, and we're nowhere near like Police Chief Toph yet. Like, she hasn't done any of the training or any of that stuff, and it's really unclear about how exactly we get to that version of Toph, but it's a reference. I suppose, what are your thoughts just on that? That seems like a very directed line to have Chong say to Toph, given where we know Toph goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's there for a reason, and that's because we do know where Toph ends up eventually. But as far as when, if ever, we would ever actually see that, I think it would be quite a while if we do at all get to see that sort of transition there. I mean, there have been previous hints before of her future profession in some of the other comics here. So this seems like it's just like another one of those where this is something that we know is going to happen to her, but we're not quite there yet. I mean, just the fact that, the whole, point of her problem here is that she's, being seen as the man is harking back to later on when she literally does become, the man in some sort of sense there as far as, actually enforcing rules and laws. So, the whole thing here is just sort of harking towards that. But, in terms of that, which is a much larger sort of progression thing that we would hopefully eventually be able to see, we're definitely far off from that, like you said.
Mm-hmm. So they continue to walk through the town, but then Toph senses the underground pro bending arena and decides that they're going to take a detour. Chong kind of just wants to get back to his bed, but he's going to follow Toph to make sure he's properly protected. We then cut to the students arriving at the new location for the underground pro bending tournament. Not pro bending, underground bending tournament. Yeah, how'd you find out about this place? The Dark One told me about it, and he just notes that in my search for poetic inspiration, I've walked many dark paths in another life. Okay, my loser uncle told me about it. He places bets on the Bender tournament sometimes, so I like the Dark One just dropping the whole act there for a second. But they walk into the tournament here. It's a different building, more metal, but it's still roughly the same. They have some boxes this time to make more of a clear arena. Looks a bit dangerous though. So they're immediately beginning to have second thoughts about this. Why don't we just go home? It's kind of weird that we're going ahead with this. And they're just like, should we really participate in this? And Hotun's just like, we're metal benders. No matter what the other metal benders throw at us, we'll be able to take them. So that's the main setup here. Then Chong and Toph also arrive at the area. They just note that this area of town is seriously lacking. And she shoots them up with earth bending onto the roof, and they can sort of watch from a hole in the roof what's going on. So that's the sort of setup for like having most of the characters in the same area at this point. Do you have any thoughts on these last few pages to get to this point?
Not particularly. I mean, I think this is it's a cool way that they're setting it up just so that everyone sort of gets there at the same time so that we can see, just sort of how things actually play out. So it's funny how that just sort of, is set up in this sort of series here.
Mm-hmm. So they're on the roof here, so I like that they acknowledge this. Toph is like, Chong, what's going on? All I can sense are fragments from up here. Just noting that through the building she can still has some sense for what's going on, but really can't see who's in the arena. So Chong explains that it's a warehouse full of angry people, all venting their anger out on the world. That one guy is wearing a terrible hat. It's just the worst, man. So we then cut to Sun and his two friends here. Are you sure about this? If I win the fight, we'll have enough money to be set for months. Sun, be careful. Don't lose control like you did the last time. I won't, don't worry. And Toph's like, Sun, that's the kid I want to meet. Chong just notes that there's some other kids there, like they're weird looking, but I can tell they got some love in them. Weird looking how? One of them is shaped kind of like a potato. The other one's got great shoes, and the third one looks like he has a poet's heart. And she's like, those are my lily-livered students. What are they doing here? This is not the place for you idiots. Why aren't you home in bed? And the bed comes up again. So Hotun registers for the fights here. He tries to act all tough, but it's just like the line's over there. They don't really know how to act in this situation. Penga is suddenly the one who's all about doom at this point. And he says, I'm the new Hotun, brave and strong, not like the old one. So it's all getting set up here at this point. It's just mainly like Toph being notified that her students are here, Sun is here, and it seems like, what way is this all actually going to go down? Anything to say about these few pages?
I don't know. I like the idea that Hotun is trying to be tough here, and I don't know. It's interesting that clearly it seems like they're definitely out of their element here. So I wonder, going back to your other comment before, if they were a bit more mature or, had different outfits, would that have affected how, they're sort of seen in this sort of environment, despite, them still, probably being pretty uncomfortable here? But no, it definitely works as just sort of setting it up, and Toph is, very surprised to see that they are actually here, because that's not, now she's getting to realize that this isn't really what she might actually want for her students.
Mm-hmm. So we cut to the fight here. It's Sun versus this earthbender guy. They're having kind of like an earthbending boxing match here with some earth gloves. Sun gets like smashed into the ground, and Chong notes that this seems like a terrible place for a young bender. Makes me feel sad things. These kids need love, not war. And he says, all that yelling and fighting reminds me of a music teacher I had as a kid. He was always yelling at me and telling me I wasn't good enough. It was really hurtful. Yelling at kids who are trying their best makes me so sad. Toph says, I yell at my students, but I also really care about them. I want them to do well. I built a safe place where young benders can develop their skills so they don't have to fight in underground bending tournaments the way I did. And Chong notes like, oh, you did that, you powerful earthbender lady. But I still like yelling at them a little bit. So there's another kind of key part of the emotional thing there of like, there's a more emotional side behind why Toph in the first place created an earthbending academy, which was something that was maybe not exactly the path that you thought she'd go down. But she also, this reveals that part of it was that as much as she doesn't mind, I suppose, the way she grew up and learned her bending, it was important for her to go through that. She doesn't feel that that is the way everyone should have to go about learning their bending, that there needs to be a safer place for them to do it, and Chong agrees with that, and that's what she's trying to accomplish here. So it's a nice little reveal about like this being more than just like, I invented metal bending, I should be the teacher, that's why I'll do it. There's more behind it. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I like that she has, a more noble motivation for, creating the academy. It isn't just for the fame and the fortune, especially since, she isn't actually charging them or anything like that right now. She's, completely sort of like sponsored in a sense. So, I like that that's sort of what she's going for. Like, she doesn't, like you said, she doesn't mind that was the way that she's learned, but, it seems like she's aware that might not be the best way, and that, having an actual teacher, is actually important to have. She had the Badger Moles, which is the way that she was able to learn, not being, having any sort of official sort of former teacher, or at least one that sort of, respected her actual abilities, if they knew of it. So no, I like that. It's definitely a nice sort of development here.
Mm-hmm. So Sun in his fight makes his comeback. He jumps up out of the ground, sends the guy sort of sprawling back, and then fires the earth kind of glove at the other guy, immediately sort of KOing him. And the students seeing this are kind of like, maybe we're in over our heads. And Hotun realizes that he's definitely seeing doom right now. I suppose, again, presenting that idea that they haven't really been involved in a lot of like fights. They know a lot of the technical side of bending, but they haven't actually, had a one-on-one fight with anyone. So seeing people who clearly know what they're doing against another bender is a bit frightening to them. So Sun gets all the plaudits here as the next opponent comes out. This kind of big, buff waterbender guy who's like shirtless and stuff like that. So I actually like the design on this as kind of just a random waterbender, but he's pretty skilled here. And they're like just watching the fight, like, is that boy really going to fight that huge waterbender? Looks like it. So place your bets, make the right one, and you can take home some serious coin. He says, I'm going to drown you, kid. Whatever earthbender tricks you got up your sleeve, they won't work with me. And Sun just says, we'll see. And then we get a pretty cool action sequence here. They obviously have barrels of water nearby so waterbenders can fight. He takes some of that out, fires it at Sun. He blocks with an earth wall. He creates sort of like a kind of circle, a ring over his head, and sends a bunch of ice kind of spears kind of coming out of it. Again, Sun dodges. He fires a big chunk of rock, but the waterbender just cuts through it with a bit of a kind of water kind of blade type thing. He then kind of puts some water along the ground and seemingly has him, pretty much like it looks like he's about to freeze the ground and take him out at this point. And this is when Sun sort of gets a bit angry, puts his hands on the ground, and the lava bending comes out. A little bit more out of control than the last time. And they really linger on the fact that when he loses it, this is such a powerful ability. Like, this is dangerous. That, even though it's an underground bending tournament, you're looking at like getting like knocked out as maybe the worst thing happening to you. But like anyone who gets touched by lava bending is going to get like horribly injured, and this seems a little out of control here as he sends it flying. And there's a lot of confusion about what exactly he's doing. What is this? You're not a firebender. And they're like, is that? And Toph, being closer to it this time, is like, it's lava bending. So there's the big reveal as everyone runs away from Sun, kind of realizing the power that this kid has. So yeah, the kind of big action set piece of the book here, some Sun fights. What are your thoughts on this?
So yeah, I really like this piece that they have here. I think, in the overall scale of the whole book, it's not, that much per se, but I think what they do here in these panels, I think is pretty visually interesting, just the way that they have, the waterbending, who seems, quite skilled here. So it looks like he definitely would be able to overwhelm Sun, if not for, the particular abilities that he has with lava bending here. So I really like how they sort of get that across in these panels here, and how, the final reveal of his sort of lava bending does, it definitely adds a lot more of a ominous feel to things. And it's definitely sort of, seems like people just aren't really aware of how to handle with it, and him not having, the greatest control over it, or at least seemingly, definitely adds to the severity of the situation here.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's got a big pool of lava out across the floor. It starts to sort of spread, and then eventually it hits the metal support beam right in the middle of the structure here. And the students are nearby, knowing that like, oh, he doesn't know how to control it. So they notice what's about to happen. Penga steps up and is like, I'll do something. And we get some commentary from above, from Chong and everyone. They're like, wow, look at that girl with the good shoes. She's almost as strong as you, powerful earthbender lady. And she's just like, almost. So she's metal bending here the structure to sort of keep it in place. And the Sun notes as he's leaving that this is the first time he's ever seen metal bending before. So they also run. So Penga has sort of maintained the structural integrity of the building, but then one of the other pillars goes, so it's still going to come down. Toph gets Chong off the roof, and yeah, this is where they kind of part company. She goes back in to help out, and Chong's going to leave at this point as a non-combatant, basically. And so the metal bending students have to decide what are they going to do in this situation. They have to do something. People might die. So if they work together, they can save everyone who hasn't made it out just yet. So they're going to show what the students of the Metal Bending Academy can do. We cut to Sun, who nearly takes a sheet of metal to the face, but Toph blocks it and dodges it out of Sun's way. And she just notes, no, that was me. You're special, but you're not that special. Because it looks like Sun potentially has done some metal bending. But nope, it was Toph. So Toph is here. She reunites with her students. And she says, Beifong Academy Metalbenders, like Hotun said, let's show what we can do. And we get the note here, you didn't call us lily livers. Don't get used to it. So they all metal bend the structure to keep it in place as it's falling apart. They allow everyone to get out. Then the back of the building collapses. But they're in control. Everyone makes it out. And Toph praises her students for what they did here. And Sun and his friends go to run off. And she just wraps him up with some nearby metal. And so she wants to talk with him. And we'll get to that in a second. So yeah, this is ultimately what the students' arc has sort of built up to. They don't need to prove themselves in a big fight and be all underground and tough like Toph. No, that they need to show that they can use their bending skills when they need to in action in a situation like this. A sort of similar situation to how they were used in the Rift, as well as in North and South, that they can help structurally, when a disaster happens, and they do really well. They have strong control, they're powerful, because it's noted that, they're Penga is almost as strong as you are, but not quite. So, notable moment, and then they linger on the idea of Toph beginning to call them by their names and not just lily livers, as like a sign that she now isn't just treating them as students, but that they're fellow teachers like herself, which we'll get more of in a minute. So, it's not a incredible arc for these characters, but it's something, and I think it's nice. But what are your thoughts on this part of the action set piece?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is nice. It is, some progress for them, and especially, how, Sifu Toph views them, it means a lot to them, for sure. So, the fact that they're able to actually work and use their abilities in the situation and, show some level of strength and control in their, metal bending abilities, I think it goes a long way, not just sort of them being able to battle, because, like you mentioned earlier, they probably haven't really been in much battles in that sort of way, and, it doesn't seem like that's particularly the core, at least what we have seen of what Toph is actually teaching them. Even if they are able to teach themselves, they're still relatively new in sort of, their techniques here, but they can use them to great effect here, and they are able to stop the building from fully collapsing until everyone's actually able to get out of there and, get to safety.
Mm-hmm. So Toph comes over to the trapped son in metal and says, I'll let you go, but you just wrecked a building, and I need to talk to you about it. And one of his friends is like, he doesn't mean to lava bend, it just happens sometimes. And so she's like, your name's Sun, right? Yeah. And he apologizes, I'm sorry, I just needed to make some money. And he says, money's good, kid, but staying alive is even better. He says he didn't have a choice, the tournament is the only thing I could do that pays. So she gives him an offer here. I'm going to give you a choice. Just outside of Yudao is Beifong's Metalbending Academy. It's a school where young earthbenders of all skill levels can learn metal bending. More importantly, it's a place young benders can call home. I bet not every one of you is a metalbender, but you're all earthbenders in need of a place to belong. Beifong Metalbending Academy can be that place if you want it to be. And so Sun is like, you're with the Avatar, and he's with the Earth King, and his soldiers. We don't like them. And she says, yeah, Twinkle Toes does have a thing for hanging out with world leaders. That's his job. My job is taking care of my students at the academy to make sure they're safe and they're learning to master their bending abilities. Also, kid, I'm the first bender in forever who came up with a brand new type of bending. You might not have invented lava bending, but it's rare and special, and I want to be the one to teach you to be a real lava bender. So I suppose we'll take a stop there. So there we go. She's offering Sun, as well as his two friends here, who are also revealed to be earthbenders, a place at the academy, even though they're not metal benders. Or maybe she can sense that one of them maybe is, or the other two are, and Sun's a lava bender. Either way, she's changing, I suppose, a little bit about how the academy is going to work. She's going to take in people of all levels, and even if they're not metal benders. And so these are kind of the first kids she's sort of reaching out to, and just making the point of, this is a big offer for you. You need to learn how to control your abilities, and I think I can teach you to do that as someone who has also invented a special ability myself. So she just makes the distinction between, like, okay, you have your views on the Earth King, as someone who's like struggling here, and yes, I'm involved with Aang to a degree, but this is the thing I'm focused on at this point in time, helping out people here. I like this. It's a nice speech from Toph offering this opportunity to the kids here. I just wish we got to see some of how she would tackle training a lava bender. But what are your thoughts on this section so far?
No, I like this. I like her sort of, laying out this sort of offer to sort of, just reach out to the people directly. Like she's, even though she does view herself as being, such a good earthbender and, having all these skills, she's still willing to reach out to people who, might be less fortunate than her, and either just, their standing or just their way of life. So I like that she's able to view this and is like you said, changing a bit of how the Beifong Academy is actually working in this sense of just being willing to take in, just people in general. So I think this is definitely, a good, progress point just to see, what potentially could become of, her academy in general. It's not just going to be metal benders. It's just going to be, any one of, any reason that, for whatever reason, she thinks needs help. So, I like that idea in general, and just the fact that she is going to, help him become, a real lava bender, and, having that sort of emphasis there with whatever a real lava bender actually is. So, I think that's, interesting in itself, even if he didn't particularly invent it.
She then says, if that's not enough of a selling point, at Beifong Metal Bending Academy you'll get the opportunity to learn brand new bending skills with 3 of the best metal bending teachers in the Earth Kingdom. Right, guys? Hotun says, that's us, the best teachers. Penga says, I love my students at the academy. And the Dark One says, I tolerate my students at the academy. They glance at him and are like, come on, guys, that's big for me, saying that I tolerate them. Sun still doesn't know, so she says, I've got one last thing to offer you. If you join the Beifong Metal Bending Academy, you won't have to sleep outside ever again. You'll have a roof over your head for as long as you need it. And if you don't like it, you can leave. No one's going to stop you, I promise. So Sun wants to join. Toph's glad to hear it. And we then cut to the kind of final scene in the book. So what are your thoughts on, I suppose, Sun here accepting the offer and the, giving the praise to her students here as being the teachers now, and the bed reference again?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is obviously he can tell that this is a really good offer here, and just, seeing this sort of, praise for, her former teachers, or her former, I guess, students that are now also teachers here, I think is, it really brings everything, I guess, sort of full circle at this point here. And just, she's giving him the option and his friends to, sort of go their own way if they really want to. But, there's a really good offer here in place of just where they can actually live and, be trained.
So in a new scene here, a bit of time has passed. Sokka and Suki arrive. They wonder, like, what happens? Do you need any help? No, we've got it handled. Suki notes that, are these your new students? They look like a lively bunch. And Toph has a feeling that things around the academy won't be so routine anymore. So later on, we get the sort of goodbye scene here with Chong. And Suki says, it's too bad you're leaving Yu Dao so soon, Chong. Where's Trustfully in Love touring next? Trustfully in Love has passed on to the great musical spirit world. Kind but fearsome Kyoshi warrior. And she's like, oh no, did the brand break up? And he just says, Trustfully in Love is no more, but me, Lily, and Moku will still play music, just not for money, only for love. It's the best, it's the way that's best for us. And Sokka says, yay, more music. So he says to Toph, and you, tiny but mighty earthbender lady, are my greatest inspiration. I'm writing a song about a small but powerful earthbender lady who is beloved by children everywhere. And she just says, nah, I just hope that doesn't mean I'll be stuck babysitting a bunch of kids when I'm old and grey, which is obviously meant to be a reference to her appearances in Korra, obviously. So then there's a bit of a rumble, and a carriage kind of comes by with an interesting design here. And they're like, what's that thing? And so Chong explains, like, this is what's going to happen. Going to be spreading our love in style from now on. We'll travel and play our music, but no more sleeping on the ground, because they have this new, basically, I suppose, the Avatar version of some sort of like a camper van type thing that I suppose has beds inside it, so they can travel and they have beds the whole time. So they've spent some of that money to get this thing, and they can do what they want to do without having to be superstars every single day of the week. So an interesting solution to it based on what Chong said earlier on. So he says goodbye, they go off, and Sokka says that he hopes their paths never cross again, and Suki just says to be nice. And then the book ends with Toph putting her hands together and saying, well, back to school, as she now has something to be excited about at the academy. And that's how we wrap it up. So what are your thoughts here on the ending of the book?
I mean, I guess this is it's a nice way to end it. I mean, it's cool that we get to see Sokka and Suki again, even though it's like very minor and very quick here. And I think, again, like you've mentioned earlier, it's really just, sort of the interaction with Chong is sort of their main sort of, I guess sort of, reason for being here. But, overall, I think it's a nice way to sort of, put a capstone on, this band that I guess was very short lived, but they're going to, still continue making music in this, double-decker ox-drawn sort of carriage thing that they have here, which I guess, like you said, does have beds. So it's definitely a interesting design that they have for it here. But yeah, it's just a quick little ending here of the new students sort of coming. There's not much else to it. I think it might have been cool to sort of get something interesting happen in the sort of metal bending academy right before the end, even if we don't sort of see any extra details of it. But it's a quick way to sort of wrap up the story that I guess could lead to more potential things in the future if they ever were so inclined to sort of go that route.
Yeah, I think this is one of the weaker parts of the book, kind of like Guitar and the Pirate Silver. Just these books just sort of like peter out in the end. Like there's not much to the ending. It's just here's some stuff we brought up and here's the very basic resolution. And that, like, look, Chong is a fun minor character, but he's not a particularly important minor character. He played his role well in this book, and they resolved his arc relatively nicely. He can pop up again at some point when Sokka least wants him to, and that'll be fun. Suki was in here for just to have a more positive perspective on Chong. I wish we had had more of a focus or important thing with Suki. Ending it like this it's nice, but I think the thing I mainly struggle with is just that they wrote this story to include a lava bender and did like all of the work to present this really interesting idea. Toph is going to train someone in lava bending. And then the book ends and it's a one shot and we're likely like never going to come back to this again. When the most interesting thing would be to see a little bit of bending training. How does someone who doesn't have the ability of lava bending actually go about training someone to use an ability like that? And that would have been cool because, like, of course Toph has the greater bending experience, having one, learned from the badger moles, or like the bending animal for Earth. So she has like this fundamental connection with Earth, and lava bending still an earth bending technique. And what Sun is lacking is a lot of technical training. She could get him there, but how do they test the limits of what lava bending can and can't do? How do they focus on that? Does she have to instruct him a bit in like metal bending, which also requires control? Is there any connection between metal bending training and lava bending training at all? How does that work? Because lava bending is interesting because it's still mysterious. We still don't know that much about it. As far as we're aware right now, it's just this bloodline ability. You have to be born with it. Avatars can use it in the avatar state because they're incredibly powerful. But is there anything that connects the other characters who are lava benders? With regards to Sun here, Bolin, Gazan, anything linking them, to try and create some like clear rules about the ability, but not really. And that's the thing. Like, there was an interview with Peter Wortman and Faith Erin Hicks recently, and they were basically asked the question of, do you plan to do a sequel to this story? And both of them basically said, no, it's a one shot. And that immediately tells me that, like, okay, yeah, like, no plan for the next time being to come back to this. Even though they've done enough here to kind of be like, if you did a training focused book, I wouldn't mind coming back to this, but they're not going to. Not to mention, I don't think we should have a lot of confidence about them coming back to things, because the amount of like main story content, stories that are left unresolved, like Azula, main Zuko's relationship, and just going back to the plot post imbalance. Why would we believe they'll come back to it? Not to mention that, like, as cool as that would be, it would still probably feel a little bit like we're still distracted from doing anything of importance necessarily. So that's just the thing with this book, is just that a lot of it's fine, it's well written, but it doesn't really do anything all that special or interesting. Like Guitar and the Pirate Silver, I don't really think there's any particular notable takeaway that does it bridge the gap with Toph between Avatar and Korra. Yes, but to a tiny degree. This is like a centimeter of development. Like nowhere near getting close to any of that stuff. The switch in the academy is nice, but then you don't really show the effect that it necessarily has. That's not all that interesting. You know, show us more of the other students actually doing some training. That would be interesting to complete, you know, their arc within the book. So I don't think it's just that like the book doesn't feature important content, so it's bad because of that. I do think even within the scope of what it could do, it also still played it very safe. They could have done a bit more than they actually did. So I think there's a bit more to be disappointed beyond just that it's a one shot. But what are your final thoughts on this book now that we've gone through it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I don't know. The whole idea of the one shot is sort of a hard one to work with because it literally has in theory no continuation to it, and as far as we know, as what you just said, is there's not really any plans for it. So that inherently that kind of like brings it down just by virtue of what it is. I think this story itself, it does a little bit. We get a bit of Toph, we get a bit of I guess sort of what's happening in the Earth Kingdom in general, which is nice to know, and that does add, I guess, a little bit of progress to our overall knowledge of the world. But in the grand scheme of things, there's not much to it, and with there being a lot more story that could potentially be told, this it doesn't quite add as much sort of hype to it as you might have once thought that it actually had. So I think in terms of where we might have thought of this book placing before we actually got to read it to where we are now, it definitely has dropped down quite a bit for a lot of people. And I think depending on your preference for Toph as a character versus Katara, you might like one over the other because of that. But for the most part, they're still in this sort of same sort of vein as far as just adding a little bit to the character, but not sort of pushing things forward, which I gather is what most people, including ourselves, are more looking forward to, which is, why, even though, Suki's story, which is, also another one shot, at least has, something more to it for a character that we don't already know that much about or haven't seen sort of like in the future. So there's, that to look forward to. So, overall, I think it's a cool book. I think for me, I definitely like it more than the previous one. But, there is, of course, more that could be done with it, even within just the story itself.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, the next one being Suki, and what that story looks set to be, looks like a marked improvement again over the Toph comic, which was already an improvement over the Katara comic. Even though it's going back into ATLA, it looks like it will at least cover a bit of the gap with Suki that happens between her getting captured by Azula and Sokka showing up at the Boiling Rock. It makes sense that,
Mm-hmm.
she was heavily involved in the escape attempts that, when Sokka and everyone arrived, she theoretically might have attempted an escape on her own or been close to planning one. And that's going to be fun to see what characters they have with Suki, how close to an escape she potentially comes. And because, of course, she's still there and is very happy to see Sokka when he arrives, it speaks to, maybe something bad happened and her planned group escape with a group, just something bad happened. That seems like it has potential, especially if because they have the sort of spirit of Kyoshi on the cover. If they go into some sort of flashback about how Suki's Kyoshi warrior training helps her to stay strong throughout everything, and we see her in more of the sort of Sokka leader of the escape type role, but it doesn't quite work out. But it does when Zuko and Sokka arrive. That works because at least it fills in a sort of notable gap in the show. And if they do some flashback stuff, we haven't really had Suki flashbacks. That's really good. So it obviously then puts a lot of pressure on what do they do afterwards, because I am assuming we're going to get another trilogy of one-shots. I can't see them stopping this new story direction after just like one set, so I assume we're going to get more. And I think if they seem to have a restriction on not being able to tell like important stories, not just in terms of character development, but just world building stuff in general, I think probably what you have to do is focus in on the characters who aren't the main characters. So I probably wouldn't really be wanting necessarily like a Zuko one shot or an Aang one shot, unless, like, say the Aang one shot is going to be a backstory, full-on backstory plot, which they might have the ability to do with Aang. Similarly, I suppose Zuko, if you tell a story potentially with him set during his search, like before the series, that could be interesting to see more of like early Zuko, but before we see him in episode 1. That's interesting. More of Aang with the other airbenders is always kind of cool to see. But I do think you probably should focus on the other characters. Sokka, there's potential, but I worry that they might go down a too much of a comedy road with him if they don't have the right story. So I'd perhaps want like more of a Ty Lee, May, Azula, because again in the interview Faith Erin Hicks actually did say that one of the characters she'd like to write next is Azula, which is a big contrast to what she said before about her. And Azula one shot could actually be interesting. My guess would be that is not the continuation of Azula, but it would have to be either a flashback like when she was younger with Azula, or maybe spanning the gap between the Search and Smoke and Shadow. Either of which would, I think, be good, and some setup work, and might get her more confident to write Azula to maybe eventually finally get back to doing it. But what direction would you want them to take with future one-shots?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the side characters is the safe bet, and can be more interesting just because those are characters that we don't know a lot about, as far as just their overall sort of, history. And I think that could be, interesting in general. I mean, Ty Lee, is sort of like a secondary fan favorite, and my, a favorite as well. I think those seem like interesting ones that you could do something with that, people wouldn't mind as much as they're not sort of like pushing the story back, forward, and, they're going back in time with, whatever the stories they do, that almost seems like a better way of doing it rather than sort of like half teasing sort of, some progression into the future, which is sort of what we got with the Toph comic here. And I guess maybe a little bit with Qatar, but not even really. So I don't know. I think maybe going further back might actually be the better bet than sort of going somewhere in between, which is just sort of, making us wonder when are they actually going to get towards, the actual future stories.
Yeah, because I suppose the other character everyone would eventually go to is like Iroh one shot, and then if that happens, like what do they do? Given the new sort of approach and what the aim of the one shots is, I can't see an Iroh one shot like doing his full backstory, like really going into the Liu Ten situation or like revealing Liu Ten's mother. I think what they perhaps could cover is actually like Iroh and Ozai's relationship when they were younger, in that doesn't necessarily have to be a noted plot event and could just be more of a character piece, just covering their dynamic with maybe a more low-key plot, but that tells you something about their relationship, which again we've never seen them interact on screen. Like, can we actually get something with them? That way it's it's developing Iroh, it's developing Ozai, but it's not covering the topics you seem to want to kind of get away from. But yeah, it's tricky because, like you say, a lot of people are, I think, beginning to question like, what are we doing right now with the Avatar comics? Like, when are we going to get back to post imbalance? That this is their new approach for now, but for how many years is this going to be? Why are they doing this right now? And again, the fact that it came from Mike and Brian is weird. And I suppose it doesn't help. It really doesn't help that we still don't know about the Korra comics and what approach they're taking. Are we doing a proper trilogy, 3-part book along the lines of Runes of the Empire, or are we going to go to Korra one-shots? I don't know. I do think Korra would actually probably work better than Avatar with one-shots, just because there's more characters that need development. But I still want to think that the comics can actually tell important stories, because they did it successfully for like the first 5, 6, obviously with a few ups and downs along the way. But you know, we know they can do that. Like they told the Ursa backstory. That's probably one of the most important things the comics did, and it's really good. I'm pretty sure The Surge is still probably the most best-selling Avatar comic for a reason, and I'm sure they're aware of that. But you know, what's going on with Mike and Brian is the main question. And I suppose, you know, we've had a long time to think about that. Do you have any solution to why Mike and Brian would choose to do this with specifically the Avatar comics?
I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, there's many speculations out there from, just other, works that they're interested in doing, or maybe other Avatar stuff. I mean, I don't know. There could be a whole bunch of things, and I'm sure, when that comes out, it'll probably be like an aha moment to like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. But as of now, there's not quite enough, information, for me to at least to automatically assume something.
Yeah, because the big takeaway, if you connect all these dots in the way that I suppose fans want them to be connected, is that they're stopping the post-imbalance story because the potential third series that could be announced, that Mike and Brian maybe are working on right now, maybe they have surprisingly decided to go with a, post-ATLA story featuring the ATLA characters. Something we never thought would happen, but maybe the way the production would work, because it's on a digital platform now, the confidence that everyone seems to have in Avatar, maybe they'll be able to do it exactly the way they want to, and they're willing to do it. So they have to stop the comics before they commit to anything, so they have open ground to work with all of the characters to do the development. That would be probably the most hyped third series announcement you could do. Is like, imagine the day they announced that and they just showed us like the older character designs for the full team in their 18 to 20 or whatever. That would be really, really cool. Now, it's obviously like hugely speculative at this point, but it's the only way in some ways to explain some of this stuff, because what's really been the problem with the trilogy comics, that they would decide to stop them after Imbalance, and that there would be a need to tell these specific stories. Qatar and the Pirate Silver especially, like, you didn't need to tell that story. And to a degree, you can make the same case for this book, and you can probably make the case for Suki alone, even if it ends up being a little bit more important. None of them so far feel essential like some of the other comics have. But yeah, we'll see how things are going. We're still at that point where we're waiting for Dark Horse to make an announcement of some sort. The weeks just continue to go by. When do you think they are going to announce the core comic? Because they have to do it within probably the next 3 months to make sure that first part gets out this year.
Yeah, right. That's what you would think at this point now, but I don't know, with how, we don't know anything in terms of like how they're doing production stuff or anything like that. And we know they do have, some of the other reprint stuff, but even that has had, hit some sort of snags as well. So it's really hard to figure. I mean, you would think that they would do it sometime here in sort of the first quarter here, if not, sooner, but I do not know.
Yeah. So yeah, we're in an interesting spot. Like, there'll be announcements that happen. We'll get like Funko Pop news, action figure news, as the weeks progress. Cover reveals for this and that. But it is the core comic announcement we're waiting for. We're waiting to see if they're going to do anything else with the novels, if they're going to make a new series of novels. Um, Obviously, third series speculation has at least started to become something that could be possible. We'll see what happens with it. But that's the way we're at, because 2020 was a positive year for Avatar. Everyone saw how popular it was. It came back for a few months. Where's the follow up to that? We've seen it on the merchandise side of things with everything that they're doing, but there really needs to be the major follow up, which we haven't quite seen yet. Which is why we went over probably like 10, 11 things in news there. None of it's particularly big though, so we're waiting for that big piece of news still. But yeah, that's been Avatar Online Podcast, episode 225. It's been myself and Greg. Thanks for listening to this podcast, and bye.
Bye bye.